Today, I'm going to kind of go over what I call the general theory of hair loss and reversitivity. It kind of sends a homage to Einstein, one of my favorite people, and he has this general theory of relativity. In this case, I call it the general theory of hair loss and reversitivity because hair loss in itself has an incomplete theory. And once you get that theory, then you can go about with general reversitivity. To say it in layman's term, you can't fix a problem until you really know how the problem started. So years back, I knew that eventually I'd get a theory that is strong enough that I would call it the general theory of reversitivity because it can encompass all of the potential doorways of men's hair loss, in particular androgenic alopecia and or male pattern balding. Now, I have something now that's called the path, which is 4 doorways plus the trigger. The trigger starts somehow and then it kind of goes into a vasodilation problem in circulation. It goes to the immune response. It goes to hormone imbalance and all the way through the mechanical physical changes. Now, it starts with the immune response. Then it goes to hormone imbalance, what we call DHT. Then it goes to vasodilation and circulation issues. And that goes to mechanical physical changes, is which I call the second head. Now, in this particular video, it's going to be more ad hoc. I'm not going to put much on the screen. I noticed I didn't do all my introductions because it's going to be pretty long. You're going to be able to listen to it. I was going to do it last week and I tried and I had a couple of things going on. So I decided I was going to kind of do it differently. Now, on my post about 3 weeks ago, it will be the subject line outline, the general theory of hair loss and reversitivity created by AQBS 7/9/2025. If you went to that post, you can kind of follow along. So here's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to read the number, subject, and the description, and then I'm going to fill in some of my experiences and what I have found to be true. And at the end of this video, you're going to kind of see how all these things fit in together. If you recall some of my videos, how it works together. So what's so important about the general theory of hair loss and reversitivity? Number one, there's not a lot of complete theories out there. And if there are, I can name one, perhaps, Rob. Then, there's still people say, well, I don't believe this. It's a lot of belief in faith and things of this nature, but science is science, even if it's bro science, okay? No theories really made me say, oh, that's it. And one of the reasons why I stated that is because if the theory was correct, then you should use your theory to be able to reverse hair loss. My theory, starting off with it, was 30% correct. Now I'm probably at around 85% and 15% distortion. And now I have a theory good enough that I could potentially restore my hair loss back to hair loss undetectable. Right now, I have been regrowing hair over the years, 2.5, but it hasn't been to the point where I hit the regrowth threshold because I could not hit the regrowth threshold. And what I call that is how this scalp looks, feels, acts like it was pre-balding. When you hit that regrowth threshold, then the hair or the mass population should start beginning to regrow again. Okay, so I'm going to start out that way, and then at the end of this video we will probably agree that there is some more work to be done, but I think it will give you a overall understanding of this phenomenon. And what is going to be even better for you is that now you can build a protocol or regimen dealing with the science behind it. We couldn't do it prior. That's why people would ask me, so what do you do? What is your regimen? And what should I use? But when you're trying to build a system, when you're trying to get to the root cause, take it from 1 to 100, and you're steady testing this and you'll stop here and do this, it's not like I was disorganized, but I was simply trying to create not only the products from scratch and the ingredients and the formulas, but also the theory from scratch, the processes and tools from scratch, and rebuilding something from a fundamental level layer that didn't exist prior to back to the barber. So I wouldn't go very fast like most individuals, because I have 7 columns in front of me, and I am putting a little bit into each column. And now it's at the point where I can see more clear. Now I can begin building those things out to help other individuals. Okay, that's why I never really promoted consultation, even though I did a few of them, because I wanted to get to this point. Okay, so we're going to start with 1. Toxicity. Imbalances originate internally. Dysfunction in key organs, such as the liver, kidneys, and gut, leads to an overflow of toxins the body cannot excrete efficiently. These systematic toxins, including acids, oxidized lipids, heavy metals, and byproducts from poor digestion, seek alternative exit routes. Okay, what does that mean in plain English? Pretty much that your body contains things it could not get rid of, so it is attempting to try to find ways to get rid of it. Okay, it's an imbalance. An imbalance means that the threshold that it's at is unnatural for your particular body. Whereas if I had the same type of heavy metals, foods, toxins, products in my body, maybe my threshold is higher. But yours says, hey, we're at an imbalance here. Something has to give. Then we go over to 2. The scalp becomes an emergency excretory zone. Due to its high vascularization, sebaceous activity, and proximity to the lymphatic interface, the scalp acts as a secondary detox depot. Toxins are rerouted and deposited into the scalp tissue, particularly around follicles, for immediate excretion through sebum and sweat. Now, this particular number 2 is the one that I was stuck on. As a matter of fact, the one that the industry is stuck on. The reason why I say this is because when you think of hair loss, most of you are going to listen and say, look, it's DHT. My suggestion to you is anytime someone says something about hair loss and male pattern balding, say why 3 times. By the 3rd why, more than likely, the answer will be genetics. Or it will be something to the fact of, well, you're just not healthy enough, or well, you're just, sensitive. It won't be a direct answer. And let's try this with DHT before we go to 3. Okay, DHT is the culprit. Let's just say that. Fundamentally, I don't think so, but let's just say that's true. Why is DHT in the scalp? It's in everyone's scalp. The reason why I'm stopping is because that's where the industry stops. I went further, and I'm not the only one, but I went further and said, look, DHT is in the scalp because of inflammation, the 3 I's: inflammation, infection, irritation. Okay, now, but why? I have to go a step further to why. So my point prior to this in the path, the trigger was gut bacterium pathogens somehow got through the gut, leaky gut, somehow ended up in the scalp because it looks similar to, I guess, the gut system. And if you look, why would I say that? Well, this villus hair there, and then there's hair in the stomach, and then we all know that the gut tells you it's your immune system. So if the immune of the scalp is if this is an immune problem, it's coming probably from the gut, which is the main immune, I guess, primary, right? So there's a little bit of bro science there, but my point is I was trying to figure out why the gut scalp connection. Okay. And truthfully, when you look at other type of alopecias, it's always, I won't say always, but a lot of times it is some sort of infection or some sort of pathogen or something to that effect. That's not just in humans, but mammals as well too. But usually the hair grows back. Now, but this too, the scalp becomes an emergency excretory zone is what I was missing, because now you could answer the question, why hair loss? Because DHT is in your scalp. Why is DHT in your scalp? Because of infection, inflammation, and irritation. Why is it inflamed? Why is it irritated? Because you have toxins in the scalp. So why do you have toxins in the scalp? Because the body placed them there, the scalp depot, in order to get rid of them. 3 whys. And now we're here. Okay. Number 3, toxin load exceeds the scalp's elimination capacity. Repeated dumping of inflammatory agents, food acids, heart water minerals, product residues, pathogens overwhelms the glands and ductal clearing systems. The drainage via lymph and follicular ducts slows, causing stagnation and lipid saturation. And this leads to what I kept seeing in hair loss. Some of the visual side effects, some of the visual things that pointed to hair loss didn't seem to be natural. What I mean by that is, when you grow as a boy, some of the things that you might encounter when you hit puberty is, I ache a little bit, especially if you had a really, really strong growth spurt. You may be a little clumsy, okay? But you don't get tearing. Now, we all have seen people with stretch marks when something stretches very fast, and it causes stretch marks on the skin. That is symbolic when it comes to like hair loss and the toxin loads, how it exceeds the scalp's elimination capacity. So why do I say that? Because the scalp, a natural scalp, looks natural on your grandmother. It looks natural on your 5-year-old nephew. It looks natural on your sister, your brother. If you shave everyone's head off, you're going to see a bunch of different little dots. You're going to see a couple of little flakes, and you're going to see just follicles. You're going to see little dots of the terminal hairs in there. And if you razor sharp it off, you won't see anything for a couple of days, but it will look the same. It will be very similar. Now, when it comes to men with androgenic alopecia and male pattern balding, you start seeing things in the scalp that we can tell that doesn't belong there. For number one, you're going to start seeing a hell of a lot of oil. And why would the scalp have so much oil? Because when you shave off a person without androgenic alopecia and you look at the scalp, it looks dry. You will see dryness, you will see flaking, you won't see oil. And that gave me the clue that what is this? Now, I couldn't figure it out years ago. I assumed it was oily because there's nothing, no hairs catching the oils or something. That's what they say, but that's not true. But then you also notice some other things. You'll notice that it's the gallia that loses the hair for the most part. You will notice that the skin becomes thicker, seemingly. You'll notice that the skull shape changes, where there's a little hunk of something at the top and something in the front. And when men are truly bald, with 7, like myself, you will be able to see this gallia looking as if there's something over on top of it, like there's flesh underneath it. Okay, so what does that mean? And you will notice that the sebaceous glands will have, when you look at the follicles in a microscope, I have one, they will have this yellow type of spot in it. where the hair used to grow. And there's some other things that you will notice about it, and you say, wait, it seems to be cholesterol. It seems to be, and I said all the time, or plaque, from the shape, from what's coming out. So my understanding eventually is that this plaque just has a different type of textures. It's the oil texture, it's the lower layer thick cold butter texture. And when you start purging, as I stated plenty of times in these videos, you will see that it comes out as if it is something that does not belong in the scalp. Okay, so everything, the drainage system, the lymph nodes, things that are supposed to drain this cholesterol out or plaque out, get stopped up because it's too much of it. And what happens? It begins to cause like a scalp atherosclerosis. It's very interesting how things kind of tie together, but I'll go to 4. Localized follicular immune response begins. In response, the immune privileged follicle initiates a local defense. Itching, redness, tenderness, and acne represent cytokine mediated microinflammation as the first line of protection against a persistent threat. What is it really saying here? Your follicle has immune privilege. And you know what else has that? The placenta. Because the baby grows in a woman's body so quickly, the body may think that it's a mutation. On the scalp, the hair is outside of the body and it grows rather quickly, so it needs its own defense or immune system to protect not just itself but from the body as well too. And this is why I call follicles feminine, because they seem to be the carriers or the birthing terminal hairs using the same exact process. And I say the DHT attempts to connect to the follicle and create a child, which will be the terminal hair, but it can't. It's impotent. Whereas testosterone in some form or androgens can impregnate the follicle, the feminine follicle. This is why when men go through puberty, the androgens attach to various different follicles around the body, and terminal hairs begin there, just as facial hair. So the 3 I's, infection, inflammation, irritation, are in the scalp because toxins are there. And believe me, when I say toxins, I'm simply saying that whatever's there is over the threshold of normalcy. It could be hard water, definitely was hard water. For me, in my culture, we use a lot of greases and stuff like that. And I did that from 9 to 19, 20. And I believe all that stuff over the years got into my scalp. Really synthetic type of greases and all those things, the hairsprays, the dyes, but hard water. And we're just saying foods, and especially proteins you're not breaking down, dairy, things of this nature that your body is already having a hard time with. It gets stuck, right? And it is not about allergies. It is about elimination. Okay. Now, 5, once the follicle, systematic immune system intervenes. Once the follicle is overwhelmed, systematic immunity steps in. White blood cells are dispatched, initiating a chronic inflammatory state. The immune system begins treating the follicle as a site of unresolved infection. And here is the answer to many of your guys' questions. Why? Why would the immune system attack a follicle? It ain't going to attack your heart. It's not attacking your lungs. It's not attacking your other organs, but it will attack the scalp follicle. Well, let's ask ourselves why. Why would the immune system using, let's just say, white blood cells attack the follicle? Because there's inflammation, infection, and irritation there. Why? Because the scalp is a depot from the body's, the other organs are depositing toxins there to be released. Why? Because the threshold in the body went over the threshold. Okay. So this brings us back to the follicle becoming overwhelmed. See, when you first begin losing hair, you're going to get the itch. We can get the bumps and the acne, but you won't lose a lot of hair. The hair won't grow as strong, won't be as thick, but you'll still have it. Once that follicle gets to the point where it can no longer fight off, the body is going to understand that follicle has been hostilely taken over. Now it is a threat to the greater system. As long as your hair or your follicles fight it off, then you don't lose hair. You may not grow as strong because, again, it's using energy to fight off whatever it thinks is bad for it. But the body doesn't intervene. It doesn't need to. But the minute you start having a receding hairline, your crown thinning, just understand the body has stepped in to shut down the follicles. So it was never really trying to target the follicles. It was attempting to target what was inflamed, infected, and so be it. It is the follicle. Now, how does DHT work with this? Well, inflammation causes us to accumulate plaque and cholesterol. Now, think about it. When you talk about inflammation in our arteries in the greater body, and you see little diagrams of inflammation, if you just try to research and say, so why is it inflammation? Why is it that there's plaque in my arteries anyway? And the answer will be, oh, because the arteries are inflamed. Okay, so we can take that to the scalp and say the cholesterol and plaque is not up there because it wants to be. It's up there because it is inflamed. But what are androgens made from? Cholesterol. Is this why when we use finasteride, it helps with heart problems? And I've said this before, but I really need you to get this. Why would finasteride help with heart problems or keep you from having a heart attack? Because maybe it is helping to dissolve cholesterol and plaque. 100% that's what it's doing. It is 100% that's what it's doing. But I'm going to take it one step further. Why are we using prostate medicines in order to regrow hair? But when you look at benign prostate BPH medicines, cholesterol is one of the things that causes your prostate to expand. So these things are, in my opinion, not inhibiting DHT in the fact perhaps it is, but what I truly think is occurring rather as a side effect, or that's what it's designed to truly do, is to stop the processes that is creating overaccumulation of cholesterol, what I call plaque. Okay, so in the scalp, you're going to have the white blood cells attacking, quote unquote, the follicle, but it's not doing that. It's actually trying to target the inflammation, but that inflammation will be surrounded by plaque, and that plaque is what is causing you to have submerged follicles. It is not necessarily DHT will be there, but what is causing you to lose hair is follicles that have been submerged in plaque because of the toxin depot. Okay, up to number 6. DHT is recruited as a local inflammatory agent. Testosterone is enzymatically converted to DHT in the scalp, not to cause hair loss, but to mediate inflammation. DHT functions like a localized steroidal compound meant to suppress cytokines and support tissue repair, a misunderstood tip to restore balance. We always ask, why is DHT there? Because why would my genes cause DHT to accumulate in my scalp if I simply have, male pattern balding as a gene, a final form? It's what I'm supposed to look like at 22. It's false. DHT is there because it is being created by all of the cholesterol that's there, and the cholesterol is what's causing the submersion of the follicles. And it is turning off the electricity going to the follicles. It's suppressing growth. It's suppressing the flow of blood because it's like atherosclerosis. Now remember, this plaque, interstitial fluid, and cholesterol is in the arteries, plus it's in the dermal layers. Okay, DHT is acting as a steroid. It's a steroid, and it is going where inflammation is, which is in the dermal layers and the follicles. Okay, it is what I call the secret service of the body's immune system. It's not the cause, it's a side effect. Then we go to 7. Cholesterol production increases in the dermis, which I spoke about. Inflammatory signaling triggers excess cholesterol synthesis in the dermis and sebaceous glands. This cholesterol saturates tissue, coats follicles, and provide raw material for more DHT conversion, creating a feedback loop. Exactly what I said. That's exactly what's going on here. And it fits all the signs. It fits what it looks like. It fits how you're able to get it out of your scalp using some sort of purging. It fits why derma stamping and derma rolling works, and we'll kind of get that at the end of this video. Okay, now going over to number 8. The DHT cholesterol loop deepens androgen imbalance. The more cholesterol that accumulates, the more DHT is produced. This persistent present leads to an overexpression of androgen receptors, increasing local androgen sensitivity. The balance accelerates follicular deterioration. So the more DHT is produced, the more there's an overexpression of androgen receptors, which is going to shut down hair growth. So hair has this infection, inflammation, and irritation going on. It's attempting to fight that off. Then the white blood cells of the body is also trying to stop it and whatever's hostilely taken over. DHT is there to help mitigate the problem, mediate the problem, and cholesterol is a side effect of that. So now it is causing the submersion, the drowning of the follicles. They have no choice but to go into the comatose telogen state. Number 9, the subcutaneous fat layer dissolves under DHT stress. DHT in high concentrations dissolves the fat that cushions and feeds the follicles. As this layer thins, vascular and nutrient supply to the follicle diminishes, initiating follicular miniaturization. Now, adding another layer on top of all this other stuff that's going on in the scalp war, now you have the fat layer, which I call the third layer of the scalp. The hypodermis or hypodermis layer is fat. Now, the paradox is our scalps look thicker when we lose hair. You can just see a totally bald man and just look at it, and you can just start seeing these sections of like thickness in the scalp, and that is not at all what we would define as fat. What that is plaque. So the plaque takes pretty much the plaque comes in while DHT erodes and dissolves the fat. Kind of like if you were to take a steroid and go to the gym, the steroids will be able to dissolve the fat in the body and the muscles will get bigger. Well, it does the same exact thing to the scalp. It's dissolving the fat in the scalp, but it's being replaced by cholesterol, and that is not nutrient dense enough in order to feed the follicles. So what do? They're going to miniaturize. In 10, drainage system fails and plaque solidifies. When the lymph drainage is impaired and blood vessels become calcified or compressed, internal sebum and oil leak to the surface, causing a classic ball shine. Internally, the lipid waste composite hardens into dermal plaque, is what I stated earlier. So you get this lipid draining problem, whereas all this plaque and cholesterol and interstitial fluid, which I want to mention here, is the fluid that happens when you were a kid and you hit your knee on the concrete on your bike, and now you kind of have this little pus. So interstitial fluid is pus. That is underneath the surface. You don't even get to that until you start removing some of this plaque, right? So in this scalp, you have the interstitial fluid, you have DHT, you have this plaque and sebum, and the lymph system, the drainage system, the waste system. The reason why the body sent it to the scalp is because, okay, you should be able to get rid of this with all those pores you have. with the amount of heat you have, it gets stuck. Now you get the bald shine. Now, when you look at men with a receding hairline, what do you notice? It's going to be shiny right around the edges of the forehead and scalp. And if you look at a man who you don't even see him losing hair in the front, but he's losing hair on the crown. If you look at the crown, what do you see? It looks oily and shiny. What is that? That's just the oil of cholesterol, and that is the stuff that's causing hair loss. Okay. 11. The Gallia aponeurotica transforms into a chronic wound. DHT inflammatory agents, hardened plaque, degrade the scalp's connective tissue sheath. The Gallia becomes inflamed, thickened, and infected, essentially behaving as a chronic, unhealed wound. So this gives you the answer that you've been looking for. Now you know why DHT. Now you know why you're losing hair in the scalp and not on your legs or on your growing or your eyebrows. Now you know that. Here's the other question that you had. Why the Gallia? Because I learned something early on, is that the Gallia wall, the little circle around the node 7 where there's hair and no hair, right, in a very strict line, that Gallia wall is still giving me problems to this day. Why? And I still get acne there to this day, because underneath that Gallia wall is the plaque, but also the Gallia itself is an entire sheath. The top of the scalp will be one big scar. I'm sorry to say, I know this is probably difficult for people to listen to understand, and to believe that you're walking around as healthy as you are, with the entire top of your head as a scar, an open wound. But that's the case, and I can prove it to you in several different ways. Number one is that's why it has interstitial fluid, which is a fancy word of saying pus. It just is. Okay. When you begin to start taking out the plaque, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. That layer at the epidermis and the dermis and the hypodermis area, it begins to compress, but not in a bad way. But it doesn't have this layer of like clay of plaque inside of it, so it gets more wrinkled. Now I could take my fingers on the side of my head, push it up, and I have a bunch of wrinkles. They're not as small as I would like them to be, so I know there's still some there. But now when I use the derma stamp 2.5, I'm getting way lower than I did when I first began, because I didn't have that layer of plaque and all this other cholesterol in my scalp. And now when I hit that lower layer at 2.5, it's a sting. Why is it a sting? Because now I got rid of the overlay, the second head. Now my body can begin to heal the Gallia sheath, and it cannot be healed as long as cholesterol is there, because cholesterol is inflammatory. So here's another paradox. While cholesterol is attracted to inflammation, it is supposed to be temporary. It is supposed to be like a salve that's covering it until the body can repair it. But when it is on a part of the body for so long, it now becomes something that you have to get rid of. It now becomes a toxin because it overstayed its welcome. And that is why the Gallia, after all the years of beginning to have this buildup of cholesterol and plaque underneath the surface, it begins to change. And now you have an entire open wound at the top of your head. If you're a totally bald guy listening right now, or if you have your hairline is receding or you're losing a lot of hair, you say, well, I don't feel any wound. I don't feel any wound. I tell you, if you start getting that plaque out, when you begin to use that derma roller, derma stamp lower, you're going to feel it. you're going to feel it. Right now, not really, okay? Another part I want to mention about this is why the derma roller, derma stamp is being called, is working. Not, it doesn't really work that good. It works with, you know, topicals and things of this nature. I had a video on that. The reason why it doesn't work as good as somebody with an omega scalp or doesn't have male pattern balding is the same reason why your sister, girlfriend, or friend who doesn't have androgenic alopecia takes minoxidil, keep on putting minoxidil on their head, they'll start growing hair on their forehead. They will. They're going to grow hair. In a couple of weeks, minoxidil will start beginning to open up those follicles, and they'll begin to produce hair. But you can use minoxidil on their hairline that's been gone for quite a while, and it will not grow back. Another piece of this is, and it's going to mention it, is scalp fibrosis, because the same thing that's causing cholesterol to build up and for DHT to be attracted to your scalp, fibrosis is the cooking, it's the hardening of the scalp as it deals with this long-term acute and chronic inflammation over time. So your main culprits to reversing hair, or the main things that I've attempted to fix, is the second head. And the second head's major problem is fibrosis. Okay. So again, once you get rid of the things overlaying the second head on top of the gallia, you can begin to heal it like any other wound. Number 12, neurovascular disconnection occurs with prolonged plaque formation and fibrosis. Capillaries collapse and nerve endings retract. Hair follicles lose their neurovascular supply, entering a semi-permanent telogen state as protective shutdown mechanism. So this is what happens as well too. Now, I had mentioned in some previous videos how I began to use a derma stamp and derma roller on areas where it's thick plaque and I can't feel it too much. It'll still bleed, but not like it's supposed to bleed. Okay. And also there's something about the nerve supply that when those nerves go offline after they're submerged in this plaque for so long, they are what I would define as the switch on and switch off for the follicle. I can't prove it as bro science, but seeing what I see, it seems as if that nerve is kind of like unplugging your refrigerator. You unplug the refrigerator, it doesn't matter how great it's designed, it will not have coldness there. It will not work there. So when the nerves are submerged so long, it's almost unplugging the follicle from the body, and then that is what we call the telogen comatose state. So two things happen that really put the follicle to sleep. Number one is, of course, the miniaturization comes from the fact that now the blood supply is being stopped because of the plaque and arteriosclerosis, but also DHT. And on the other end, being that it has been down for so long, it's switched off to telogen comatose because the very thing that's powering it, the electricity, is now pulled out the wall, and that's what we call the nerves. 13, scalp fibrosis and muscular rigidity. I don't know how to say that. Rigidity set in. The dermis begins overproducing keratin and collagen layers. Muscle tissues around the gallia lock into rigid tension, creating fascial restriction, tissues hardening, and chronic immobility. So here's the ironic, another piece that you've been looking for. Why do they call it tension? Well, tension comes from two reasons from my perspective. Number one is your scalp layers don't supposed to be as thick as they are, but when you remove all that clay from underneath it, it goes back down. So that pull of the scalp layers apart and the compression of them, because now you got something that really doesn't belong in there. So there's a big difference between like butter, hard butter, in the refrigerator and fat. So obviously cold fat would be harder, but if you compare a hard stick of butter to fat in the refrigerator, that fat is still going to move around somewhat. Okay, now the dermis begins overproducing keratin, so the inflammation, how do I say this, the skin cells begin to overproduce. So when you look at your frontal, many of you would think my hairline is pushing back, when actuality you probably have way more skin layers in the front, and that's why you don't see any dots in the front where your hairline is back, which leads to another paradox phenomenon that you guys see. When you have a frontal line that's moved back, it looks like it moved back because you don't see any pores. Well, you don't see any pores because of number 13, fibrosis, the thickening of the skin and the overlayering of skin that blends in with your facial skin, but it really shouldn't be facial skin at all. It should be scalp skin. So from a bro science perspective, it's almost like the facial skin overlays on top of what is supposed to be the scalp. 14, mechanical changes create circulatory failure combined with fibrosis, inflammation, nerve loss. The scalp structural changes prevent meaningful blood, lymph, and nutrient flow. Hair loss follows the Hamilton-Norwood pattern, a map of structural and vascular collapse. So the Hamilton-Norwood pattern has never been about some sort of pattern of loss. It is just the human growth pattern of the scalp in reverse. This is why I stated so many times, probably more times you guys want to hear, is that this is why you can go look at pictures of newborns and you can go to see the various different stages of the Hamilton-Norwood pattern, because that's how the hair grows in. But when you begin to lose your scalp circulation, it begins to reverse, and hair grows where the strongest current of circulation is first, then it fills in the harder areas. So around the gallia will be the strongest current, at the top a little tuft in the middle, and then around the crown. And then after that, both the crown and the frontal are the two hardest pieces. Those things begin to go first in the Hamilton-Norwood pattern because they grow in last. If you look at it, even a baby with a great amount of hair, if you pull that little front part back, it's going to be tapered to the back. It's going to look like a Norwood 5 or so, but it's going to be very long. If you were to shave the hair down, you will see that the very area in the front going to the back, and the little, again, Norwood 5, is just like that with babies too. There won't even be any hair there. It will be villus hairs. Okay. Number 15, biological surrender. A new homeostasis is reached. This leads to the last part of this. Eventually, the body stops fighting. The immune system adjusts to the plaque-covered, tension-hardened scalp as new normal. All repair signaling halts. The follicular field is immunologically quarantined, and hair loss stabilizes in a dormant scar-like state. Now, the phenomenon of not reversing hair loss is not because it's genetic. It's because of number 15. Your body gets used to the scalp being in that state. It's used to the telogen state. It's used to that threshold of toxins being in there. But what it does is quarantines the scalp so it doesn't affect the other pieces of the body, the other organs. Now, when you think about it, if the scalp depot was the place on the body where these organs were sending stuff to that, and that becomes quarantine, then your question would be this: then where else would it send it to? Is that the reason why severely bald men have higher heart issues? Because we have cholesterol throughout the body, because it is fighting the inflammation from the things that we cannot waste out. So it brings it full circle into why we can never reverse hair loss like other alopecias. It's because the scalp gets quarantined. So from the beginning, it's full circle. Something happens in the organ, transported to the scalp depot, bunch of stuff happens, everything gets clogged. Next thing you know, it's quarantined because it gets too bad, and now we walk around bald. And when we get these hair transplants, this is why they only last a specific amount of time. And this is why you have to get a transplant and use finasteride and these prostate medicines along with it, because the same thing occurs. The body is going to shut it down because the plaque is going to submerge the follicles. Okay. When you look at what occurred, and if you were to follow this the way, hopefully you've been following it, your first thought would be, okay, how do I get my scalp back to the regrowth threshold? And I've been trying to figure out a formula with purging, and I found it. It's a little violent. I call it the violent purge. I'm still kind of working on that, and I'll be showing you guys how to do it, or you can get it from me. Doesn't matter. You know, it just is what it is. But the thing is, we have to figure out how to get rid of it. Number one. Number two, the mechanical physical changes, as you see, the second head, interstitial fluid, aka pus, the inflammation, infection, irritation. You want to treat your scalp as if it has some sort of a dermal disease, some sort of infection. Because again, why would you do that? Because you want to help the immune system fight what it thinks is the problem. That should slow down DHT accumulation, and it should also slow down the production of cholesterol. Also, the dermastamp, dermaroller, all those things are to help with hair, but again, when you have the second head, it's not going to work as good as it's supposed to. Okay, so in general, on part 2, I'm going to kind of talk through some processes on, now that we have this, what you can start with, and I'll break it down from a crown perspective. How did I get my crown to regrow again? Much different than the frontal, which is the hardest, by the way. And then we'll kind of go through some basic protocols that are going to use the general theory of reversitivity. So be patient with me. I know I had a lot of ho and hums in here. I'm not going to edit this video too much. So hit subscribe, comment if you need to, and tell me what you think about all the different numbers of those. I wish it can be simplified. I believe I can get it to 12, but I had to show how all of those things kind of work together, and it really encompasses everything that you've dealt with. Okay, so see me on part 2 for the general theory of reversitivity, and we'll focus on the reversitivity part, not just the hair loss part. And as I always say, iron sharpens iron, and we only have each other. And remember, if I can do it, you all can do it too. Let's get you back to the barber.